Are you racist? Are we all racist? And where does racism even come from? Is it hardwired into our psyche, a natural instinct that's impossible to overcome? Or is it something that we learn and can unlearn?
This is Signs of the Times Radio with Kent Kingston.
Well, it's great to have you on Signs of the Times Radio. I'm in our Sydney studios, and with me is the author of our March magazine cover article, Mr. Lyndon Chuang. How are you, Lyndon?
Good, thanks, Kent. Very good to be here. Cover, that's right, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, you're March cover girl, mate. Well done.
Oh, life's complete now. Bucket list item ticked off, all that jazz.
That's right. I should probably qualify that. I'm sorry, dear listeners. There is not actually a picture of Lyndon on the front cover, but his story is featured on the front cover, so that's good. Well, Lyndon, we don't usually have props in the radio studio.
Yeah, I brought a friend in.
Yes,
yeah.
But you've brought a friend in. I'm seeing a plastic box with holes in it, which looks a bit ominous. What is going on with this?
Well, figured it would make this a bit of a party, and two's a crowd. Or was it three's a crowd? No, three's a crowd. Let's make it a crowd. And so I brought along a little friend of mine. Would you like me to get her out a little?
Yes, I certainly would love to have a look at who you've brought along. Here we go. The box is open. There's a sort of a terracotta thing. Oh, hello. Yeah. And he's lifted up, and underneath we have the beautiful patterning of oh, hello.
Here we go.
Is that a python?
This is a rough-scaled python, and it's one of a couple of pet pythons that I own. I've been in this hobby for maybe 11 years or so.
Oh, wow.
But yes, this is a rough-scale python. She's about 9 years old.
Yeah, and quite active, quite curious. Look at her. Wow.
Yeah, you want to? She can go towards you. Yeah,
She's on my hand.
Yeah.
She's cool and smooth.
Yeah, so the rough-scale python name comes from
crawling up my arm.
Have you held snakes before?
I have. In fact, I think I even held this snake a few years back.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
but boy, she's bigger now.
Let's just hope she doesn't get caught in the like headphone cables and stuff.
Yeah. So how long is she now? She's not huge. She's not huge. I mean, I've seen big like pythons in the rainforest crossing the road.
There you go. She's all yours now.
And they're just about from one side to the other. Hey, look, listeners, if you'd like to check out a picture of the python, you'll have to visit our Signs of the Times magazine AUNZ Facebook page, and we'll put something up there for you.
Yeah. She's curious. So yeah, she goes up to 1.82 meters. Maybe max.
Okay.
Like snakes really never stop growing if they keep getting food, so she'll just keep growing.
She just wants to explore. She's like over my shoulder.
You see how she's going up?
Yeah.
So she's
she likes
very
to
much
climb up, does she?
She's very much an arboreal
snake.
She's
a tree climber.
Exactly. So let's just make sure she doesn't go into any of your
and
equipment.
she's just like sliding around my arms and over my shoulder, and I don't know where she's going. Where's she going? She's around my back now.
I'll just get her off there so we don't actually lose her into some of the equipment.
Wouldn't want her escaping in the studio. Luckily, it's a small one.
But yeah, she's really docile. She's really gentle.
Yeah, she is. I can feel that, she's holding on quite strong around my arm. She could probably have a bit of a grip. I mean, it's interesting, in your article you speak of these gentle creatures.
Yeah.
And I think, well, these are gentle creatures that kill their prey by strangling them alive. So,
bit of a paradox.
Which is probably what freaks people out. And you find a lot of people are freaked out when they find out you keep snakes?
Yeah, most people think it's a very weird thing to do, to keep snakes. It's well, you know what? It's a decent hobby in Australia. Like, a lot of people do it, but snakes still have this general. They come with this sense of fear and wariness about them. So, like, I've had people, as mentioned in the articles, come over and just like, because I keep the snakes in my bedroom, and like
as you do,
they outright like don't come into the bedroom. Like, I'm not going in there. That's just
this is why you're not married yet. You know that, don't you, Lyndon?
Yeah. That's good to know.
Snakes in the bedroom.
My girlfriend tolerates them. I won't say she likes them. She tolerates them, which is a good thing.
There you go. In your article, like you explore this sort of fear of snakes, and you particularly explore the question of whether a fear of snakes, whether a few of our phobias and fears are an innate thing, or are they something that we learn? Where do you, like, having researched that a little bit, but what do you think?
I've looked into it a little bit, and there is research that says, for example, that humans over many years, centuries, millennia maybe, of evolution have adapted this innate fear of snakes. But so there is that element of the research, but the research that I find maybe from what I've looked into a little bit more consistent is that it's actually a learned response.
Okay.
So children, now a lot of children might be scared of snakes, maybe, but a lot of adults are scared of snakes. And so that's kind of a passed on trait or characteristic, even if a parent shows some, she's going up towards the microphone.
Yeah, she's calling over my microphone now. Can you hear that?
No, the microphone's syncing.
No, she's very quiet.
Let's just make sure she doesn't get in there, because we might not be able to get her out.
She's making no mic handling noise at all. She could get a job as a on a TV set holding a microphone, I think.
So
let's put her back in the box, because she's just crawling all over me, and I don't know if I can concentrate, and I don't know where she's trying to get.
Okay,
but she's beautiful. Wow, so beautiful, sort of brown and light brown and dark brown patterning on the back, and a white belly. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful python patterning. Wow. So your research, so far as you have investigated it, suggests that our fear of snakes is not something that's hardwired, that's programmed into us. It is something we learn.
Most of the research I've come across and read about have suggested as much. It's very much children pick up on things very, very early, be they obvious cues or responses, or even just general wariness from the parents. Children pick up on these kinds of things very quickly, and therefore learn that behavior or that response at a very young age. So, from what I read, it's not really something that's deep innate. It's more of a learned response.
Wow, I can still feel the sensation of that snake like crawling over my arms. It's funny because because someone else in the office earlier was saying the same thing. She was holding the snake for a while, and she said afterwards, as she sat down at her desk, "Oh, I can still feel the sensation of it like crawling."
Yeah, I guess it's a strange thing. Like it's not a physical thing that we would normally kind of feel.
It's a
kind of lingers. Yeah,
it's a new sensation. So your brain's probably still sort of getting used to it. Like if you're not normally on a boat and you go on a boat, and that night you're lying in bed, you feel yourself
still
sort of
moving,
rocking up and down. It's your brain's still trying to make sense of what was that all about.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. Now, the interesting thing that you do in your article, Lyndon, is that you make the leap from talking about about snakes and people's fear of snakes in particular, and racism. A fear or hatred or just a dislike or a prejudiced attitude towards people of another ethnic or cultural group. Is that an obvious leap to take for you, or were you being sort of creative when you went there?
A little bit creative, and more just kind of linking the fear of snakes. And so my mind kind of went into the path of, well, what about the fear of people? And this kind of, specifically in regards to children, because I mentioned in my article a few years back now, I was in New Zealand just traveling in a car, and then for those who haven't seen me, I'm just to clarify, I'm an Australian-born Chinese, so let's just get that out there. And so when I was traveling in the car, I was in the backside passenger seat, and we stopped at a lights, and a little boy was walking past with his family and was making the fingers, pulling the eyes to the side, Asian eyes at me and pointing and laughing, and I was kind of like, well, for one thing, I was shocked, but then it's like, what makes a 7-year-old act that way? Like, think that way? Like, so that fear of snakes, fear of people, and I was kind of doing a bit of an overlap there.
And I guess the other interesting thing is that you are training to be a primary teacher. So I guess thinking about, children and how their attitudes develop, how they learn is something that is of particular interest to you right now.
Yeah, pretty much. So I was just kind of thinking about like what makes a child act that way. And so like, I guess the linking to the snakes, what makes a child scared of snakes? A learned behavior, we are concluding, or from the research I read, has concluded that as much. And so I was thinking, well, racism then. Innate? I don't think so. I think this is a learned behavior picked up from parents or other people of influence that children can pick up on.
Well, this is interesting because I know that if I was to go to let's say, a remote village in the Papua New Guinea highlands, for example, and wander into a village and encounter a 2 or 3 year old child who had never seen someone with, my, paler shade of skin before, and I was to lean down and say, hello, how are you, little boy? That child would scream its head off and, bury its head, in its mother's shoulder or just run. Wouldn't I be right in thinking that, well, look, the fear of someone from a different race is pretty much innate?
Yeah, well, I think in that sense, for example, I don't know if it's a fear of your pigmentation or is it just that, hey, this is new and I don't know how to process this. And I think there's for me personally, I think there's a very clear distinction of like wariness. And I mean, we all have biases to things that we find normal and routine. This is not just in regards to people, but we kind of become creatures of habit and we get used to certain things, therefore more comfortable in certain situations. And then
So if that child, for example, was brought up in a multicultural suburb in a city, for example, and was exposed to different people of different skin tones, like from the earliest,
I wonder if a child would act that way.
You wouldn't get that reaction.
Again, it depends on the child, their makeup. Some children are outgoing from an instant, and some children are cautious of every living thing that moves, so to speak. So I guess it would vary, but I think so. Just exposure probably to the variation of maybe different kind of people, different languages, different looks of people probably would allow a child to not be so freaked out if something new came along, because differences are that's normal and that's
right.
They're used to that spectrum, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Look, I think that probably makes sense, but I guess I just wondered because it does seem to be pretty instinctive sometimes.
I think we're drawn to what's familiar. I'll buy that, but I think there's being drawn and comfortable in what's familiar, and then the leap to racism. I wouldn't overlap those two. That means racism. I personally wouldn't do that.
Yeah. I mean, there have been some critics who said, we should be careful with immigration because the countries that we see that are most socially stable in the world are often those that are very ethnically homogenous. Where we don't have to deal with these differences in ethnicity and culture, and it's just much more peaceful just to be surrounded by your own kind.
Yeah.
And I guess I can see a certain logic in that, but I don't know if that's the way the world is for most of us these days.
I understand that too, but I guess in terms of, if you were to live in not that those countries are in them of themselves like this bubble where nothing can get in, but just from, I think, the world's opening up. You can get anywhere now. You're going to be exposed to different people of different cultures. So is that the path going forward? I don't know.
Just to separate and put everyone back in their little cultural enclaves.
Stay there.
It's
like I don't know if that's going to work.
Pandora's box has been opened for good or for ill, and I guess we just have to learn to deal with it one way or another, don't we? Yeah. What do you think about? I mean, I don't know how much you've travelled in other countries, but
a little bit.
But you've grown up in Australia. You know the Australian experience. How do you think like race and racism is dealt with in Australia? Do we have a unique way of dealing with it? Or, same probably in most countries?
I am mindful of the fact that talking about racism is a very, let's say it's a very serious topic. It's a very polarizing topic. I've read some articles where it's just definitively, Australia is a racist country.
Sure.
I don't like dealing with those things because it's kind of like this overgeneralized concept that doesn't really take into account people's individual experiences and thoughts and feelings and that sort of thing, so to speak.
Sure. I mean, I guess that we could say that for anywhere. Look, in any country, you're going to find a variety of people. You're going to find people with strong views, one way, strong views the other way, no view at all, and everything in between. But I guess I just wondered if you had a sense of our cultural tendencies when it comes to issues of race and racism. I guess the obvious comparison to make is with the United States, because they loom very large on our cultural horizon. And I feel like in some ways we are picking up more and more American attitudes when it comes to race. Like, for example, we now use the phrase the N-word, which is a very American thing. I mean, I didn't even know what that word meant when I was a kid. We sang, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch an N-word by the toe. and had no idea, no idea what it was talking
I don't
about.
think I've heard that before, but okay.
It was just a word. You know, I remember my parents used the word Negro sometimes. They didn't use it in a disparaging way. It was just the word they knew to refer to an African American. Whereas now, obviously, we say African American or black, or we're sometimes not sure if we're allowed to say black, or like, I don't know, things sort of change through the generations.
Definitely. And I think in Australia, like growing up in Melbourne, in my youth and younger days, it was more from, I didn't see it personally, but from what I saw on the news and what people were saying, there was a high kind of awareness and maybe resistance to the Greek community in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. And
I grew up in Melbourne too.
Yeah, exactly. So you've heard
a few
about
years
that.
before you, but I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and so...
But then by the 90s, it was the Vietnamese who were the targets.
Exactly.
Because
So
it was heroin and Cabramatta and all this sort of stuff. And
then now I'm probably more so towards people that of Middle Eastern origin and
or
Muslims
African,
and that sort of thing. So it changes. It changes. So, but going back to like in terms of the climate of racism in Australia, like I've experienced some very volatile forms of racism in Australia as an Australian-born Chinese. Like people have called me names that I don't want to really kind of repeat, like or done the whole Chinese mocking language thing at me, like yelling at that to me across the street, like that sort of thing.
Yep.
But it's one of those things, like, I don't want to say, like, you know, oh yeah, racism's rife in Australia, because if I was to just simply go from a logical standpoint, the number of people that I've encountered that have been volatile towards me because of my race, to those that haven't, there's no comparison.
It's
like the numbers game just...
It's like 0.001%.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I know we feel those things a lot more because they hurt, but it's not really...
They stick in our minds, yeah.
Exactly, so yeah.
Well, that's a good point. I've heard it said a few times that Australians tend to be casually racist. Like, you're just at someone's place, you're hanging around the backyard, you're having a barbecue, having a chat, and someone will, just casually, because they reckon you're their mate now or whatever, they'll like just casually throw in a term that might be fairly racially volatile in another context, but they think because they're your friend now, they can like call you that, in a just joking around mate sort of way. Or, I don't know. If they were talking to you, say something about Asian food, or make some sort of joke or some sort of crack, just to sort of maybe see how you react, to let you know, hey, I'm comfortable with you. I feel like I can be myself. You can be yourself too. We can all open up here. And I think maybe among Anglo-Australians in particular, that has historically been a way that we sort of show that it's all right. You're my mate.
It's almost like a sign of affirmation, and
that's right.
Term of endearment almost.
That's right. We don't need to walk on eggshells around each other. It's all cool.
Yeah.
But is that an excuse just to, sort of let racist attitudes hang out, or is this actually something healthy that allows us to cross into that sensitive area that perhaps we can start to talk about some of these difficult issues?
Yeah, and like racism is tricky, and it's
no kidding.
And it's like, even when we're talking about this, we're talking about racism as a whole, but there's different kinds of racism and that sort of thing. Like there's the systemic racism as well, and like we're just talking about kind of overlapping into my personal experience a little bit. You still remember that cartoon that the Australian cartoonist drew about Serena Williams post? I know that
she's there like yelling and having a tantrum or whatever, which she sort of had done on the court. Yeah. And that was seen to be a racial stereotype of her and feeding into a...
Particularly in America, that was received they were shocked that would be printed, and they saw that as an outright form of racism. But again, based on what you said, it's kind of like I've had friends joke around the fact that, I'm an Asian and can't use chopsticks, or make a rib, and that sort of sense. I don't take offense to that. I don't, and I don't want to go into the commentary of like, oh, we're far too PC these days and everything has to be...
Yeah, why do you have to be so easily offended and so hyper vigilant all the time? Can't you just relax and take a chill pill?
For me personally, racism as well, the way that I've grown to look at it, a lot of things can appear racist. To definitively label someone as a racist, that is a big call that I don't feel I'm willing to make, because I honestly think racism is true racism is a small window into a person's heart. Like, is there hate there? Was that said in hate? Was that meant to belittle someone? And I don't think some of those jokes actually are. Like, I'm okay with that, personally. But then again, the problem is, there's a recipient. How does a recipient feel to that kind of comment as
Yeah,
well? And that
yeah.
will change as well based on where they're at, their past experiences, their beliefs, their heart, so to speak. So,
Well, this is where it gets challenging, Lynn,
Yeah.
because I mean, you're coming from a Christian background. You know, Jesus said, whatever, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them to do unto you.
Yeah.
So, how does that work when
but
it
even
comes?
that's relative.
Well,
right?
yeah. How does that work? This suddenly becomes a challenge, because I think, okay, well, I need to treat you as I would like to be treated, but you're from a different ethnic or cultural background
Yeah.
to me. So how do I even make sense of that? Like, you might not actually like the same things I like. That's a challenge, isn't it?
Again, this is why I don't think racism is a small thing, and I don't think it can be looked at through one specific lens. Like, it's very multifaceted in that regard, so to speak.
So in order to sort of apply that golden rule, I guess you need to somehow try to put yourself in that person's shoes.
Which technically should be another golden rule, really, isn't it? In a certain way. And
yeah.
one of the people that I quoted in the article, I think, was talking about the difference between cultural awareness and cultural competency. Like, the first is just you're aware of diversity.
Yep.
I acknowledge it. Diversity exists.
Yeah.
Competency is more like, I acknowledge it, I'm aware of it, and now I'm going to step into that world. I'm going to step into that other person's shoes, like what you were talking about. But I'm also going to become like part of that and feel that, experience that, not just go like, oh yeah, that exists. I think that's a healthy pathway to go down.
How do you do that sensitively, though? As being a white person, we are often accused of co-opting other people's cultures, and you know what I mean? It's, oh yeah, I know all about, I can eat with chopsticks. I'm all cool. Look, I just got my hair braided so I can hang around with all my cool African friends and be African. You know what I mean? It's like, you're not Asian. You're not African. Like, you are a white person. You can't just come in here and, browse along the smorgasbord of multiculturalism and take the bits that, that take your fancy. Surely that's not what you mean by cultural competence.
No, it's more in I guess, an awareness and understanding of different people, different cultures, and learning to or see the good in that, actually, and see the value in that, more so than picking and choosing little bits of cultures that you find, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing.
That you can co-opt for your own exotic collection.
Yeah. Actually, I remember a basketball player in the United States got in trouble for that because he was an Asian-born American and started doing his hair in braids and some other
cornrows or something.
Yeah, and then one of the African-American players said, hey, you're Asian. Don't do that. You're not black. That's what this person was saying, paraphrasing, but that's what he's saying.
Yep.
But then I read one article that actually brought up the fact that, you know what? This particular player who's doing his hair in like a cornrows and that kind of way, he's actually, perhaps maybe if you look at it from a different lens, he might actually be celebrating parts of the African American culture,
or seeking to belong. I mean, NBA is a sport very much dominated by African Americans. So if you're in that scene all the time, you can understand why you'd sort of want to fit in.
And I don't see that as a bad thing. I don't think it's belittling that or taking it on kind of like haphazardly. I think it's just like, hey, I recognize value in your culture, and I want to maybe learn or even be a little bit a part of that. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. And that's, it's hard. Like, what do you do then? Keep out, this is our culture.
Exactly.
You can't have it. Or wow, thanks. It's what do they say? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Yeah.
And I get people are protective of what they feel is theirs and what they find familiar and don't want people to encroach on that. But personally, I'm all for building bridges as opposed to walls. And I think our wall can potentially do a little bit more of that.
Yeah. And that means, I guess, allowing people to sometimes naively step into a space that's not really theirs. That's an opportunity for them to learn and to connect, isn't it? Rather than being slapped down, let's hope.
Yeah, like when you stay out, what about, you know what, come in, see for yourself, experience the culture, learn a little bit. That's cool. Why not?
Well, no, that's awesome. It's interesting with this, current, coronavirus thing that's going on. It seems to have sparked I don't know, there is a little bit of anti-Chinese. I mean, we're dealing with a bit of anti-Chinese sentiment, with overseas investors and I mean, the communist government is a whole other issue as well. But I went to Chinatown last night and, I was just wandering around there. I love the scene there in Sydney and went to a restaurant there, loved the food. But I told some colleagues this morning that, you went where? You went to Chinatown? Why did you go? It's like, there seems to be this sense that anything Chinese, somebody even said to me today, you realize that they build, was it Mercedes cars in China now? So hopefully they don't come with coronavirus.
As in the cars themselves have been affected. They're going to pass on to the people.
Our mattresses are made in Australia, not China, so you can be sure they won't come with coronavirus. It's this. It seems to be very easy for us to sort of jump. Anything Chinese, anyone Chinese is suddenly infected by association, and it's a really easy jump to make for a lot of people. I mean, they're half joking, but only half.
It's an easy jump though, and what's scary is that. What are the children seeing now?
Yeah.
What are those minds that are going like, I'm going to obviously mimic and copy what my parents are doing or what people of influence are doing. Mm-hmm. And now the message is avoid Chinese people. Mm-hmm. What is that saying to young
Chinese
kids?
People, Chinese food, Chinese products, Chinese places, the whole works.
So what is that telling kids to do or to behave or how to act? Like,
it's an interesting.
I find that picture scary.
It is. It's like the new generation of the whole sort of yellow peril mentality. This has happened in previous centuries and it seems to be not far below the surface.
Yeah.
Sort of already. It only takes a couple of incidents and it's you scratch it and there it is. Which is I guess why people say Australia is really racist, even though like you say 99% of the time, most people are cool.
Been absolutely awesome. So,
wow. Look, really, really fascinating stuff, Lyndon. I appreciate you, sharing with us and some of the, thought-provoking, stuff you've been saying. So just to finish off, can you give us some practical strategies to maybe reach across some of those cultural divides that are between us and people outside our ethnic or cultural group? Any tips or things you've seen work really well?
I haven't personally gone out of my way to experience or meet new people from different cultures, but nor have I avoided it. I think that's the main thing is about in your space, in your travels, just being open to meeting new people who might be different physically, have a different skin color or might believe something different, but just be open to, hey, that's still a person. And just being open to those conversations or, hey, if you are on the plane or on the train, sitting next to someone of a different skin color is not a bad option. You might actually learn something or meet something and that kind of thing. So I didn't actually go out like as a Chinese-born Australian. I haven't gone out and looked for different people, but I haven't closed different people off either. I think that's really the main thing. I don't know, as a Christian for me personally too, it's kind of like my belief is people's worth is dictated on the fact that every single person is a child of God. That is just default. And that doesn't change. And so if you look at different people like that, I'm not going to say that I'm colorblind because I think we're all prone to what we're used to and what we find normal and safe. And we all have different biases. But
and given our discussion about the golden rule, is colorblind even a state you would really want to be in?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think it's just about seeing people as people. And they're worth your time. They're worth your respect just because of the fact that they are people.
Yeah. And I guess it's
they
important to get to know people as people first. So ask about them, ask about their family, ask about their work or their study or whatever.
I think a lot of these racism attacks sometimes are based on very little personal experience, I reckon.
Yeah.
It's just what's been fed or what's been seen on the news.
Or maybe just a couple of negative experiences that has then put someone off a particular group and that's it. They've written them off.
You've written them off entirely.
Yeah.
And I remember a MASH quote that said, one of the characters, Colonel Potter, said, there should be a rule in war that you need to sit across from a man and get to know him before you shoot him.
Wow.
And I think that's just kind of like, maybe that's something that we could potentially do a little bit more of like,
not shooting.
Well,
but getting to know.
Yeah. Well, I'd say a verbal attack is a shot in a certain kind of way, I guess. So it's just like, he's that. Or maybe actually they are more than that, so to speak as well. So
Wow. So got to get to know people as three-dimensional real human beings, as human as we are and our families are.
Yeah. Instead of writing them off as a simple label.
Yeah. Make some friends, do some learning.
Yeah.
Love it. Thanks very much, Lyndon. Really appreciate you being on Signs of the Times Radio this week.
That's right. No worries at all. And hey, thanks for letting me bring my friend in as well.
Yes.
I'm sure she enjoyed it.
Great to meet the snake. It was awesome.
Cool. Thanks, Kent.
Today's episode was based on an article appearing in this month's Signs of the Times magazine. A subscription is just $26 for 11 issues a year. To find out more, visit signsofthetimes.org.au. Signs of the Times has been published in Australia since 1886 and is proudly produced by Adventist Media.
This is an Adventist Media podcast.